In our last session, we went through chapters 7 and 8, and we saw that chapter 7 was an interlude between the 6th and the 7th seal. And in chapter 7, the servants of God in Jerusalem, that is the Christian Jews, were sealed by God before the calamities began. And they were sealed so that those calamities might not befall them. And we saw that this was actually an echo of what Ezekiel saw in a vision in Ezekiel 9, where before Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, he saw, as it were, an angel going around with an inkhorn and putting marks on the heads of all the inhabitants of Jerusalem who sighed and cried over the abominations done in the city, that is, who had a heart for God and were basically his faithful remnant. They were delivered. The other angels that were seen in that vision in Ezekiel chapter 9 went out with battle axes in their hands and slaughtered everybody who didn't have that mark on their head. So it was a slaughter in 586 BC when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians, but the remnant were spared, and it is emblemized by the fact that God had them marked on their foreheads. So also in chapter 7, God's servants in Jerusalem before the Holocaust of AD 70 are marked, the 144,000, and they did in fact escape. The Christians in Jerusalem did escape that tragedy. Then we saw at the end of chapter 7 that there was a great multitude from all nations and peoples and tongues that also were saved. So God not only saved the remnant of Israel, but an overwhelming mass of the Gentiles as well that are seen in heaven glorifying God, who have come out of all of this. And after that interlude in chapter 7, the long-awaited seventh seal is broken in chapter 8 verse 1, and nothing really happens. It's like everything is building up. Every one of the seals gets a little worse than the previous one, and then you get to the seventh and you're expecting the ultimate disaster, and instead there's silence in heaven for a half hour, which perhaps is to be understood as a dramatic tension, a quiet before the storm, a calm before the storm, as we might say. And then appear these seven angels with seven trumpets. And there's a vision at the beginning of chapter 8 where there's the prayers of the saints are being offered up with incense before God and entering into his nostrils. And these prayers apparently are bringing about the results that follow, because the same incense burner that offers up the prayers then takes coals from the altar and throws them on the earth, implying a continuity between the prayers and the consequences. And then come the seven trumpets. Well, we've covered in chapter 8 the first four. And after the first four trumpets were sounded, an angel was flying through the midst of heaven. And I might just say that in the Alexandrian text it says an eagle. So if you're looking at something other than the King James or the New King James, it says an eagle flying through the midst of heaven. It says in the Textus Receptus an angel. I don't suppose it matters too much, but just in case you're looking at another translation, we say, why does he keep saying an angel when it says an eagle? It's a textual variant. But this being flying through heaven in chapter 8 and verse 13 says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the land, or of the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the three angels which are about to sound. Now this is indicating that the next three trumpets, the last three of the series, will be disastrous beyond the scope of the first four. So much so that great pity is to be had for those who experience what is about to take place with the sounding of these last three trumpets. We'll find after the fifth trumpet is blown, it says in chapter 9 verse 12, one woe is past. Behold, two more woes are coming after these things. And then we're going to see the same thing in chapter 11 verse 14. After the sixth trumpet has been sounded, it says in chapter 11 verse 14, the second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly. So each of these last three trumpets is a woe. And that is because they are set off from the first four, apparently by their intensity, Just as when we saw that there were 7 seals, the first 4 were set off from the last 3. The first 4 were each revealed a horse of a different color, and a rider, and a judgment. So the first 4 seals were 4 horses, so-called 4 horses of the apocalypse. And then the last 3 seals were different. In this case, the first 4 trumpets are passed over with rapidity, but the last 3 are set off from them as being unusually intense, and we get much more description, at least of the 6th, or the 5th and the 6th trumpets. Now, chapter 9 is occupied with the 5th and the 6th trumpet. And chapter 9, verse 1, it says, "The 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. And to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth," or on the land, "and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. They were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death, and they will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. And the shape of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. And on their heads were crowns of something like gold. And their faces were like the faces of men. And they had hair like women's hair. And their teeth were like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. And they had a king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. 1 woe is past, behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these things." Now, this particular vision of the locusts has captured the imagination of commentators probably more than any other passage. And of course, the temptation is very great among those who see these events as fulfilled in the future and see it as perhaps a future modern war that is dominating the landscape of the tribulation, this approach of Armageddon and various other modern wars leading up to that, to see these locusts, as they're called, as some kind of military aircraft. Helicopters usually are the suggestion of choice. The sound of their wings is like many horses running to battle. You know how loud choppers are. You know, they've got crowns of something like gold. People say, well, you know, John, he's taken off and he kind of sees this in a vision, and he doesn't know anything about technology. To him, these just look like locusts. Frankly, they kind of do. Some helicopters do. I mean, the helicopters come in all shapes, but obviously some helicopters look almost like dragonflies. In fact, you wonder if someone who the first people who designed them had dragonflies in mind to mimic. They do look like insects from a distance, I suppose, to someone like John. And the crowns of gold, perhaps they were seen off the plexiglass bubble, the reflection of the sun. It was shining like gold. Their breastplates were like iron. They obviously were metallic. They had faces like men and hair like women. Difficult to know exactly what the hair like women would be unless the helmets the pilots are wearing don't look like man's hairstyle or something, and the man's faces are there. There's so many attempts to make this out to be some recognizable military machinery, or some actually say they are UFOs. But helicopters are usually what is suggested, even by those commentators who claim that they're taking Revelation very literally. It's very common among the dispensationalists. In fact, they are the ones who do this most. They say that they're taking everything literally, and yet these are not taken literally. They're taken to be aircraft rather than what they are said to be. What they are said to be is locusts with scorpion tails and these other unusual features. Some kind of a mutant insect. But obviously they are symbolic. I don't think they are symbolic of aircraft. You see, those who say that they are aircraft are not really taking it symbolically. They're just saying John's seeing something and he's giving a literal description of what he sees, but he mistakes what it is. You know, we would recognize them as helicopters coming in battle array, but he, of course, is unfamiliar with them, so he thinks he's seen a locust plague. Now, there are things about this that make it difficult to know how it could be helicopters. For one thing, they don't kill people. Military helicopters usually do. If they're armed, they usually have missiles, and those don't just torment people for 5 months and leave them alive. In most cases, they kill just as much as any other kind of military weapon does. They're killing machines. And it's emphatic that they don't kill people. It's repeated twice. They only torment them for 5 months. Hard to know how to fit that into the scenario of these being helicopters. Likewise, they don't destroy any green thing. But helicopters, if they shoot missiles, especially in any kind of jungle warfare, they're going to destroy a lot of green things. There'll be a lot of green things destroyed that way. And also, they don't hurt those who have the seal of God on their forehead. Now, these are, of course, the 144,000 who were sealed on their forehead in chapter 7. They were sealed to be preserved from this kind of thing, and they are kept safe. I suppose we could imagine a time in the future where the saints are in the midst of warfare. Missiles are flying, machine guns firing everywhere, but God preserves the Christians. They simply are not in the line of fire, and God keeps them safe. That's not an unimaginable thing, but generally speaking, military machines kill indiscriminately. Whole towns, populations, neighborhoods, whatever they attack, they don't discriminate between the Christians and the non-Christians among them. And it sounds like these do. These are under direct orders to afflict those who are not Christians, but to leave the Christians alone. So what are they? Well, if a dispensationalist wanted to be quite literal, they'd have to say they are, in fact, mutant insects. They're locusts with scorpion tails and so forth. Now, we have to remember where they're coming from. These appear out of the smoke that rises out of what's called the bottomless pit in our translation. In the Greek, it's the abyss, the abusso. This term is sometimes translated the abyss and sometimes the bottomless pit in Scripture. But it is the place where demonic powers are incarcerated. It is the place where later, in Revelation 20, we read of Satan, the dragon, being bound with a chain and thrown into the abyss. And then later he's released from the abyss. This is apparently a place that stands for the enslavement or the captivity of demons. In fact, in Luke chapter 8, when Jesus encountered the man of the tombs who was inhabited by a legion of demons, they begged him in Luke 8:31 not to send them to the abyss. And he accommodated them, at least momentarily. Where they went after the pigs died, we don't know. Maybe they went to the abyss then. But the point is, the demons saw the abyss as a terrifying prospect for them, a place where he could send them, and they would be apparently trapped there. We read in both 2 Peter and Jude that the angels who sinned are kept in chains under darkness, awaiting the judgment of the great day. The word abyss is not used in those passages. In fact, in Peter, the word Tartarus is used. But we have no other reference in Scripture to any place called Tartarus, and it's not impossible that Tartarus is a name for the abyss. We will not press that point. But the thing is that there is a place that Peter calls Tartarus, which is where he said fallen angels are in captivity. But we know that the demons were afraid to be sent to the abyss, the bottomless pit, and they knew Jesus could send them there if he wished. In chapter 11 of Revelation, and verse 7, it says that when the two witnesses finish their witness, the beast that ascends out of the abyss will make war against them and come and overcome them and kill them. This is the same beast that is seen rising out of the sea in chapter 13. And it is clear that the beast is simply the devil with skin on, because in chapter 12, the devil, the dragon, is described as having 7 heads and 10 horns and being red. And likewise, the beast is described as having 7 heads, 10 horns, and being red. It's a thin disguise, not easily hidden, that this is the devil embodied in some form. We'll worry about what form that is later, but the beast is said to come out of the bottomless pit, out of the abyss. And as I pointed out, Jesus, or some angel, incarcerated the dragon himself in the bottomless pit in chapter 20 for a while. So these creatures come out of the abyss. All we know about the abyss is that it's the place where demons are kept. And therefore it would appear to be a release of demons upon the world, or upon whoever the victims are of these visions. Now I've suggested that when we read the word earth, the better translation in these contexts would be land. And I need to clarify for those of you who haven't heard this discussed before that land is not really a better translation for the Greek word, it's just an equally good one. That the word in Greek can be translated land or earth with equal justice, because it's the word in Greek for land, and it's the word for earth, same word in the Greek. So the question is, are we talking about things that are happening to the earth, that is the world at large, or to the land, that is the land of Israel? And my suggestion has been that if we translate it as the land, which is something that many commentators believe is the right thing to do, although the translators haven't generally done that, then we're looking at a calamity coming on the land of Israel. And that would be suited to the general theme of the book as I understand it. We're talking about the invasion of Israel and the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. Now, these locusts are not the Romans, in my opinion. I believe the Romans appear when the 6th trumpet is sounded. This is something that comes and does harm before the Romans do. You see, in the 6th trumpet, people are going to be killed. This trumpet isn't killing anyone, just tormenting them. This is not the end. This is just the time that makes people wish it was the end. They desire to die, but they can't. They're looking for it to all come to an end, but it isn't coming to an end yet. There's 5 more months of torment. And so, my suggestion is going to be, and I'll give you much to support this, that this is referring to the unleashing of hordes of demons upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem during the siege. Now, before I ever had any reason to interpret this passage that way, I read Josephus. I haven't read all of Josephus, but I read enough of Josephus to get a sense of what was going on in the siege of Jerusalem. And I remember thinking, there's no way that intelligent people, and by the way, most Jews I met are intelligent people, would act so crazy as these people acted. They acted like animals. They acted like demons. They were just absolutely wicked toward each other and toward themselves, in that they really acted against their own best interest by, while they were besieged by the Romans outside, their real enemy, inside, since they felt secure from the Romans, they felt the Romans couldn't get in, they had the leisure to kill each other and to divide into 3 warring factions in the city and to wage wars inside the city with each other, to destroy each other's food supplies when everybody was starving. I mean, this is just, it's like if anyone had brain 1, they would have thought, wait a minute, guys. You know, if we stop killing each other, we might actually survive. But they were crazy. And the details that Josephus records of the things that they did are just so astonishing. You never read of anything like it. When Jesus said, "Then shall be great tribulation, such as never was since the world began, nor ever shall be," when you read Josephus, you could almost believe it. It's hard to imagine anything that bad ever before or afterward. And he's not writing to confirm anything Jesus said. Josephus didn't even know what Jesus said or what Revelation said. He just was there. He just witnessed and did the research and interviewed the people who were there who survived and got the information and wrote as a historian. But he himself said that it was his opinion. Josephus said it was his opinion that there had never been anything in all of history as astonishing as the behavior of these people during the siege, because they simply did not act like intelligent human beings at all. They acted like wild animals or like demons. And when I was reading Josephus, it occurred to me, it's obvious that demon possession was rampant in the city. And it was later, but not much later, when I was reading Revelation, I thought, well, hey, duh. We see it right here. One of the judgments that God sent upon them was he opened the bottomless pit and let the demons come out in hordes like a swarm of locusts and torment the people. Now it says for 5 months. Generally speaking, I think that the time designations in Revelation are not usually literal. And this might not be either. Though it's difficult to know exactly what 5 months would symbolize. There is a sense in which it could be literal, and that is that the siege of Jerusalem, that is the final siege, because there's more than one. The final siege that resulted in its destruction, and the time when the craziness inside the city was at its worst, began in April of AD 70 and ended at the beginning of September. It was a 5-month period of siege, and it was the worst period of time that Josephus describes. And this could essentially be a literal length of time that these locusts supposedly were, I say supposedly because they weren't really locusts, that they were unleashed and tormented the people with insanity, really. That was before the Romans came in and physically did them in. But they were spiritually possessed, spiritually wiped out before the Romans even got in. And by the way, Josephus often mentions how often the Romans were more compassionate toward these Jews when they saw how miserable their own behavior had made them. Of course, the Romans were not exactly compassionate people in general, but they were so shocked by what they saw in the behavior and the misery, the self-inflicted miseries of the Jews when they came into the city, that Josephus often comments on how the Romans were just almost like, they felt pity. They were reluctant to do more harm to these people that had already done so much to themselves. But they got over it. If you turn to Matthew chapter 12, I believe Jesus explains what we're reading here. Matthew chapter 12. There are many times, I think 5 or 6 in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus makes comments about what he calls this generation. And while some people want the word generation to mean a race or a family, when you actually read all the cases where Jesus uses the term this generation, it just doesn't work as race. The word generation means all the people living at the same time. And for example, Jesus said in chapter 11, we're not looking there, but in chapter 11, Jesus said the people of this generation are like children playing in the streets, saying, we piped for you and you wouldn't dance, and we played a dirge for you and you wouldn't mourn. And he said, that's what this generation is like. He explained it. Because John the Baptist came to you and you say he has a demon. He played a dirge and you wouldn't mourn with him. Then the Son of Man came eating and drinking and you wouldn't dance with him. You just said he's a wine-bibber and a glutton, a friend of sinners. Now, Jesus said he was describing that generation. What generation? The generation that had occasion to react to John the Baptist and Jesus. His own generation is what he's talking about. Likewise, later, of course, we're all familiar with the statement he made in Matthew 24:34, this generation will not pass till all these things are fulfilled. And while many people have tried to make that statement mean anything but what it sounds like it means, Jesus did not leave us the option of taking it wrong, because in a statement talking about the same details, only less detailed, in Matthew 16:28, Jesus said, some of you standing here will not taste death before these things happen, or before you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So what is described in Matthew 24 is also spoken of in Matthew 16. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, this generation will not pass. In Matthew 16, he says, some of you standing here won't die before this happens. Obviously, he leaves no doubt that when he says this generation will not pass, he means some people living at that time will not die. There will be people living of his contemporaries. That generation is his contemporaries. Now, in chapter 12 of Matthew, this is one of the places that Jesus talks about his generation. And it says in verse 43, Matthew 12:43, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits, more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. That's an unexpected end to that paragraph. Sounds like he's just giving us some information about what happens to demon-possessed people. Once the demons come out, they tend to want to come back and bring friends with them. And he's talking about a man. When a demon goes out of a man, the demon goes out and comes back and inhabits that man. And the state of that man is worse than the first state. He's talking about an individual and his problems with demon possession. But then he says, and that's what this generation is going to be like. That's how it'll be with this generation. What? This generation will be like a man who had a demonic problem that Jesus cured, but did not do more than sweep and garnish the house, and left the house empty, and the demons came back in force. 7 means a total number. 7 is the number of completeness. In other words, the man was somewhat demon-possessed when he had a demon. When the last state came, he was totally demon-possessed. He was totally given over in bondage to demons. Now, this does, in fact, parallel that generation that Jesus came to. It's interesting how little we read in the Old Testament about demons. In fact, the term demon, in the sense we read it in the New Testament, doesn't really seem to appear in the Old Testament. We do read of evil spirits in the Old Testament. Same thing. The New Testament also uses the term evil spirits as a synonym for demons, but very little. We read in the Old Testament of some people having an unclean a spirit, or an evil spirit, but that's usually God sent an evil spirit against Saul, or against the men of Shechem, or a lying spirit to the prophets of Ahab. Or we read of someone having a familiar spirit, which usually means they're a medium, and they're apparently demon-possessed. Those references in the Old Testament are found very rarely. But once Jesus comes on the scene, demons are everywhere. You know, it's one of the peculiarities of the Gospels that suddenly, once Jesus is there, demons are there all over the place. Every time Jesus goes anywhere, he runs into demon-possessed people. In the synagogue, in the tombs, out in the streets. In fact, many times it says, just summary statements in the Gospels, Jesus went about all the villages in Galilee, healing all the sick and casting out all the demons. It's almost like demon possession was as matter-of-factly discussed as sickness. Yeah, you go to town, you cast out the demons, heal the sick. It's like a major part of Jesus' ministry, everywhere he went, was casting demons out of people. And yet you don't even find the phenomenon of demon possession much before Jesus arrives. So what happened here? Well, it says in Revelation 12 that when Jesus was about to be born, the dragon was poised to kill the child at his birth, but failed. It does look like the devil was waiting for Jesus. The devil knew he was coming and was threatened by him, and seems to have launched preemptive attacks, like when he tried to get Herod to kill him by having him kill all the babies of Bethlehem. It may well be that Satan also unleashed demons on the population to resist the movement of Jesus at that time too. We can't be sure, but we do read in Revelation that the devil was definitely mindful of the arrival of Jesus and willing to do everything he could to stop him. It may be that that's why the demons are seen in force in Israel when Jesus shows up, but not before. But what did Jesus do? He cast those demons out. Everywhere he went, he cast demons out of the people. By the time Jesus left, I don't know if there were very many villages left that Jesus had not cast the demons out. In fact, he had sent his disciples out 2 by 2. On one occasion, he sent out 12 of them, 2 by 2, to villages that he wasn't going to make it to, or to villages he was hoping to get to later. Another time, he sent out 70 disciples, 2 by 2, on a similar mission, and each case he told them, cast out demons, heal the sick. In other words, not only was Jesus going to all the villages casting out all the demons, he had disciples going to all the villages casting out the demons. This was quite an assault on the demonic powers. In fact, when the 70 came back and reported back in Luke 10 and said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name, he said, I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. I think what he's saying is, this is the end for Satan. This is Satan's downfall here. We're making a major attack on all his villages and throwing out all of his troops. This is the downfall of the enemy. And it was, by the way. Jesus defeated him at the cross. But he was in the process of defeating him during his ministry. By the time Jesus was done and left, Israel was like a man who'd had his demon cast out. Satan had come in force, but where the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord raises up a standard against him. And Satan's forces came like a flood into Israel, and Jesus raised up a standard of opposition to them and overcame them. And by the time Jesus' ministry was over, there weren't many demons left in Israel. You find some in Ephesus. You find them in various places in the book of Acts. Not really in Israel much. Maybe not at all. And although Satan filled Ananias and Sapphira's heart, that may not be the same thing as demon possession. The point is, Jesus had come and he'd cleaned house. And like a man who had the demon cast out of him, Israel had been given a second chance to get it right. Now, the demon's gone. You need to fill that space. You need to embrace Christ. You need to be filled with the Holy Spirit. You need to fill that vacuum. And so God poured out his Holy Spirit on the inhabitants of Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost. And thousands of them received him, but not all. And those who did not still had that vacuum. And Jesus said, you know, this generation is going to be in danger like a man who has the demon cast out of him, but doesn't close that door, doesn't fill that void. That original demon and 7 more worse than him are going to come back, and that man's state is going to be totally in bondage to demons, totally possessed. You know, that's what this generation is going to be like. At the beginning of that generation, Jesus cast out their demons. At the end, the demons came back in a multitude. And you cannot read Josephus with any kind of knowledge of the New Testament or of spiritual realities without, there's no one could read it and not conclude that these people were just totally blinded, totally deceived, totally tormented by demonic powers. And this, I believe, is what Revelation is saying. The 5th trumpet sounds, and this innumerable horde, probably, they're not innumerable, said to be, but a locust plague generally is innumerable. Locust plagues are overwhelming. They come out of the pit, the place where demons are incarcerated. They're let go. They're unleashed upon the people of the land, and they torment them for 5 months. Now we know that we're not talking about real locusts here. In fact, it's almost as if the vision deliberately gives special details so we'll know we're not talking about regular locusts. 2 things about these locusts are unlike regular locusts. One, it says in verse 4, they were commanded not to harm the grass or any green thing or any tree. That's not what locusts are like. Locusts do little else but damage green things. In fact, they eat every green thing in their path. They don't hurt people, but they sure do hurt vegetation. These are locusts that aren't like regular locusts. They don't hurt the vegetation, they hurt people. Furthermore, it says specifically in verse 11, they have a king over them. Now, not only do locusts not have a king over them, obviously, but the scripture goes out of its way to point out that locusts do not have a king over them. Over in Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 27, Agur in that chapter says this, the locusts have no king, yet they all advance in ranks. He's talking about regular locusts. And, you know, I mean, lions and tigers and bears don't have any king either, nor do centipedes or birds or anything. But it's interesting that the Bible would go out of its way to mention that locusts don't have any king. Actually, no animals have kings, but that locusts are said to have no king in Scripture, and yet these ones are specifically said to have a king. These ones are ruled over, and who are they ruled over by? The demon that opened the pit. I say demon. We don't know that it doesn't say it was a demon, but it's an angel. From it says in verse 1, the fifth angel sounded, I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth, and to him was given a key to the abyss to open it up. Now, I don't know who this star fallen was, although it could be Satan. If he is, he's the one who's said to be the king over them. The name given for him here is not Satan, but it's given in Hebrew and in Greek. Abaddon, which in Hebrew means destruction, and the Greek word Apollyon, which in Greek means destroyer. These are the alternate names. Interesting that Hebrew and Greek names are given for this, not just the Greek. The book is written in Greek, not Hebrew. Why give the name in Hebrew and in Greek? It may be in order to tip the readers off that when you read names, you want to not leave out of consideration their Hebrew forms. Why? I'm only guessing. But it is my opinion that 666 is a reference to Caesar Nero's name in a Hebrew form. And John says, you who are clever, you who are wise, calculate this, figure this out. I've given you the hints. The man's name is 666. If, as I suspect, this is a reference to the Hebrew rendering of Caesar Nero, which does total 666, then, and yet the Latin and the Greek do not, then it is in code so that the Romans, if this book would fall into their hands, would not recognize who's being mentioned there. But the Christians would, especially if they knew Hebrew, which they apparently are expected to know some. There are some Hebrew words scattered throughout the text. Armageddon, for example, is a Hebrew word. Alleluia, which occurs several times in chapter 19, is a Hebrew word. Abaddon is a Hebrew name. He could have just said the name of the angel is Apollyon, which means essentially the same thing in Greek, and then it would just be sticking with the language the book is written in. But by saying, and in Hebrew, his name is kind of the same thing, only in Hebrew. It might be one of the hints that John intends for the wise to take into consideration when they're calculating the name of the beast. Maybe his name should be considered in Hebrew as well. That may be a stretch. You certainly are not obligated to hold that view. But otherwise, we have perhaps unanswered the question, why is this name given in both languages? There may be a better answer. I have not heard one. The star in verse 1 is fallen. In chapter 10 of the previous chapter, verse 10, chapter 8, verse 10, it says, a third angel sounded and a great star fell from heaven. When it comes to the third trumpet, he sees a star falling, but with the fifth trumpet, he sees a star fallen. The star has already fallen before he sees it. It's already sometime in the past fallen. And then he simply sees a fallen star doing something, opening a pit and letting these things out to torment people. And that may suggest it is Satan. And by fallen, we might think of him as a fallen angel, and that may be the correct way to look at him, but that's not necessarily implied. If this is Satan, he could have fallen in the sense that Jesus said, I see Satan falling like lightning from heaven. This was taking place during Jesus' ministry and accomplished essentially at the cross. In Revelation 12, verses 7 through 9, we see this war in heaven where the dragon is cast out of heaven to the earth. And that's not the end of his career, because they say, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because the dragon has come down to you having great wrath, and he knows his time is short. Satan, as the book of Revelation 12 and John chapter 12, verse 31 suggest, was cast out of heaven at the cross. And therefore, at the time of 70 AD, he was fallen. He had lost his position. It specifically says, a star fallen from heaven to the earth. That's what Jesus said. I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. So this could be a reference to Satan. The name destroyer may simply be a nickname for him, like Beelzebub is, apparently, in Matthew 12, where there's reference to Beelzebub, the prince of the demons. Here, this is the king of the demons. King, prince, could be the same character. Or not. It would be clear that if these locusts are demons, and they're under a king named Apollyon, that king named Apollyon is either the devil himself or some lesser ranking official in the devil's hierarchy, under Satan. It doesn't matter too much. But the fact that he's a fallen star, and the fact that we know that Satan is said to have fallen, may be a hint. Now, before the locusts were seen, a great pillar of smoke came out of the pit, which darkened the whole sky. And then he saw out of the smoke these locusts came. And as it was made clear, they could not hurt the Christians. They could torment men, but not those who had the seal of God on their forehead. The Christians have immunity. The Christians were not present at this invasion. The Christians actually had escaped from Jerusalem, and Christians in general have authority over demons. Greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world, John said in 1 John 4:4. Jesus said in Luke chapter 10, verse 19, he said, "Behold, I give you authority over serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you." He's talking to his disciples. Power over serpents and scorpions. Here we have scorpion stings attached to these locusts. The next vision, the sixth trumpet, there are horses that have biting serpents for tails. It's figurative, of course, but the point is you've got the imagery of scorpions and serpents. And Jesus said to his disciples, "I give you authority over serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy." He indicates that scorpions and serpents are examples of the power of the enemy. That is the power of Satan. And he said, "Nothing shall any means hurt you." So these images of serpents and scorpions, no doubt, are demonic images. And the locusts, they're described as locusts because of the amounts of them, because there's so many of them coming out of smoke. He could have just said scorpions were unleashed, but scorpions are usually rather solitary animals, and you'd think, you know, maybe a scorpion or two might be seen. But when you talk about a locust plague, you're talking about the whole sky being darkened. Locusts come in the millions, tens of millions at a time. And when there is an actual locust plague, the sky is literally dark, because the thick clouds of locusts, it's a terrifying prospect. Anyone living in an agrarian land knows that you cannot stop a locust plague. You can step on a locust, you can squish them, but when there's 100 million of them, and they have only one thing in mind, and that's to eat all your crops, you're doomed. It's the end for you. You cannot resist this. And I think the reference to them being locusts suggests their great numbers. The fact that they have a sting like scorpions suggests that they torment people and that they are demonic, like scorpions. Scorpions sometimes have a sting that's bad enough to kill people, but not generally. Most scorpions just make you really hurt bad. They say that when the Roman armies invaded Carthage in North Africa, the scorpions there, their stings were so great that although Roman soldiers were taught not to flinch, even when they're in fighting and when they get, you know, stabbed or sliced by swords, they didn't flinch. That's how they're trained. But it says that when they got stung by the scorpions in North Carthage, in North Africa, they wept. The Roman soldiers wept. The pain was so intense. They didn't die. That's how scorpions were in that region. The pain is just intolerable. And so it is a torment to be greatly feared and dreaded. And enough to make you wish you were dead. But scorpions don't generally kill people. In verse 6 where it says, "In those days men will seek death and they will not find it. They will desire to die and death will flee from them." I believe this is more or less impressionistic rather than that they really would not be able to die if they really set their minds to it. The teacher I was raised under, who was a futurist and thought this was talking about a future tribulation, thought he said, imagine a time when you want to die, but nothing you do can end your life. He says, imagine shooting yourself in the head with a gun and still living. He said, you have no brains, but you still be alive. You can't die. Well, that's kind of taking these words a little more literally than I think it's intended. I don't think it's saying that it'll literally be impossible to die, that you couldn't just jump headlong off the wall of Jerusalem and have your head cracked open and the brains splat off, you'd still be alive. That's not what it's talking about. It's saying that things be so bad that although most people don't have it in them to kill themselves, they could wish that their life would end, but it's not that easy. It's not that soon. It's not yet time. They are tormented for 5 months before the actual invasion of the armies comes through the walls and kills them. They'd rather die sooner if they could.